The theme today is where I want to start, is with our theme and then talk about the wise men coming. We at St. Luke's dedicated ourselves to grow in faith and love, to serve together, and to reach out with the gospel of Jesus Christ. As I've said before, that's just the theme for this year, and as far as I'm concerned, it could be a theme for a number of years because it's our mission statement. Today, as we look at the wise men coming, I'm going to review the story. And as I review the story, I think it's really wonderful that we continue to review some of these stories in the scriptures. I loved it when I was a kid to be a part of the Christmas time and being part of Mary and Joseph and the angels and the shepherds, the wise men. And I enjoyed it later on when I saw the kids reenacting that particular play. Celebrate when we do Christmas, Lent and Holy Week. It helps me through Easter, Ascension. I need all of those things because sometimes I forget things. It's like the lady that was driving the car and she was speeding, and as the policeman came along and stopped her and came up to her and said, "Why are you speeding?" And her husband, who was elderly, was sitting next to her and said, "Sir, we are on the way to the store and we want to get there before we forget why we're going there." And so I like to remember the stories because sometimes I forget some of the stories. And sometimes I'll look at a story and I say, "Wow, I never saw that before," because God reveals to me something new. As we look at this particular statement, there are a number of ways that you can look at that mission statement. And they're all valid and they're all good. And people are going to look at that statement a variety of ways because it is a good statement. And I choose to look at it for myself and my own growth, and I look for it through the Stephen Ministries. I'm going to bring out the word grow. For me, it is growing. We're going to grow in faith, grow in love, grow in serving, grow in reaching out. And we do that all at the same time. We're growing in all of those areas right from the beginning when we have accepted Jesus Christ as the Lord and Savior. But the question is, how do we measure spiritual growth? How do I know when you're growing spiritually? How do you know when I'm growing spiritually? How do I know when you're going away from God? How do you know when I'm going away from God? Many times we don't see that in ourselves or in each other. And so we have to begin to figure out, how do we measure this? Oh, I know how to measure physical growth. Those of you who are parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles, you know that sometimes you have little ones coming up to you and stand beside you and say, "I want to see how tall I am." And they come up to here sometimes. And then later on they come and you're up to here. And then they come up to here. And then some of the kids are up to here. You know, I can measure that. I can also measure the fact that I used to be this way around, but now I'm this way around. I don't like that measurement, but you know, those are ways to measure physicalness. I can measure myself intellectually, and one of the ways I can measure myself intellectually is in math. You know, once I started to count 1, 2, 3. Later on, I could add and I could subtract. And sometimes I like to play the game with the kids. Okay, what's the number between 2 and 4? And they're able to shout out 3. Oh, they're growing in their math. They're growing in that understanding. And then comes division, and then comes algebra and geometry and all of those, trigonometry. And wow, I can measure when they're growing intellectually. And I can measure when they're growing physically. But how do I measure your spiritual growth? God wants us to continue to grow spiritually, and to understand what spiritual growth is all about. What's our goal? Is to be like Jesus Christ. And so we have to take a really good look at Jesus, and we will throughout this series, looking at Jesus to see what it is that we are to grow towards to become more like Jesus Christ. So let us take this idea of growth into application for a moment. The wise men were from a far country. And I believe that even before Jesus Christ was born, these wise men were studying the stars. And they were studying, what does it mean, and the stars, and what do they mean, and what are they trying to tell us? And then they also studied the Old Testament. And as they studied the stars and they studied the Old Testament, there was a great study that was going on. Intellectually, they were beginning to understand what God was saying. But then something wonderful happened. The star actually appeared. And when the star actually appeared, they used the intellectual knowledge that they had and said, that's it. That's the star that we've been studying about. That's the star that is talked about in the scriptures. That's the star that says that the King of the Jews has been born. That's it. And then they went to bed and slept and said, okay, that's nice. No, they didn't. They acted upon what they believed. And they said, let's pack up and go and follow that star because we want to see the King. And that's what we do. We see Jesus Christ and we pack up and come to worship because we want to see more about the King. We pack up and look at the scriptures and we study in Bible study and so forth because we want to see the King and more about him. And follow what they did. And so they followed the star. They were thinking that that star was going to lead them directly to the King. But not so. That star led them to Jerusalem. Why? Because God had more things for them to learn. God had more things for them to understand. And God had more people that he wanted to talk to about that star and about the birth of the King. You see, in a way, God said a number of years ago, Jim, I want you to go to St. Luke's. But when he told me to go to St. Luke's, he didn't tell me all the things that I was going to do here. He didn't tell me about all the things that were going to happen to me here. He did that step by step. He didn't tell me that at some point we're going to lose a pastor, at some point we're going to have this to happen, at some point, Jim, you're going to do this, and at some point you're going to do that. He didn't tell me that your wife's going to have pneumonia for a number of years or that she was going to have surgery for a number of years. None of that was told to me. He just said, go to St. Luke's. Okay, go to St. Luke's. And every day he guides that, just like he does for you. He tells you to do something, but every day he's in that guiding process. He didn't tell you when you first got married that sometimes you're going to have a marriage problem. He didn't tell you when you had children that at some point you're going to have these problems with your children. He didn't tell you that at some point you're going to lose a job or you're going to be transferred and you're going to have to move. He doesn't lay out the whole story for you. And so therefore you need to be in constant study of asking the question, God, what are you doing in the world? What are you doing in my life? And I know I'm raising the question, God, what are you doing in this world? God, what are you doing in this congregation? What are you doing in my life? People who lose a loved one ask that same question. God, what are you doing? What does this mean? How do I get through this in faith? So they came to Jerusalem, and God sent them to the king, King Herod. Now, I don't know if they really knew who King Herod was, but you know, King Herod was a bad dude. I think Martha used the idea he was Grinch. He was worse than Grinch, but he was Grinch. He wanted to steal Christmas. So Grinch Herod, here as she calls him. He pretends to be somebody he's not. He pretends to be a believer in God when he's not. He pretends to be religious when he's not. What did he do? He helped the Jews and paid for a big temple, bigger than they ever had before, pretending that he was their person. But he wanted them to follow him and not God. He wasn't what he said, what he pretended to be. And there are people out there in the world today that they pretend to be somebody, and they're not. And sometimes we get caught up in following those people and forget to follow God. Remember, always follow God and his people. So the wise men told the king, where's the king of the Jews? Now he pretends to want to be interested. But King Herod, he's like the guy in North Korea. He'll kill a family member if he thinks the family member is going to try to overrule him. So when he says, go and find the child, he isn't saying, I want to come and worship him and meeting it. I want to you find the child because I want to do away with him. Just like there's people that say, I want to lead you to Jesus, or I want to show you how to live the Christian life, but they lead you astray. In the lesson that you were led today from the New Testament, isn't that what was happening in the church? Paul was saying, people are saying, you can live the way you want. You can live immoral lives. And Paul is saying, no, that's not true. James in his book is talking to the Christians from the time of Christ on. And he's saying to the people in the church, you're playing a game. And we do that in our families. We do that at work. We play a game. What's the game? The game is I want to elevate myself and I want to put you down. The rules of the game are simple. I'll talk to you and I'll put you down when I talk to you, or I'll go around and I'll gossip about you and say, I'm so concerned. We got to pray for this person because they seem to be going astray. What are they doing? They're playing the game, putting the person down, trying to raise themselves up. If you're really concerned about somebody, you pray about them. You talk to them individually. We'll go on to that some other time. Anyway, the religious leaders said that the baby is going to be born in Jerusalem. And they came out, or in Bethlehem. They came out and they found the star again. Wow, wasn't it wonderful, the final of the star? Think about it. That star was so bright they followed it. Why only 3 or so? If the star was that bright and that meaningful, why didn't other people follow the star? You see, we believe in Jesus Christ. We believe that God created the world. We believe that Jesus Christ came down to this earth. We believe that Jesus died for our salvation. We believe that he rose again from the dead. We believe that he ascended into heaven. We believe that he's coming again the second time. We believe that he sent the power of the Holy Spirit. We believe that when we die, we're going to heaven. Why don't other people follow that star, to follow that light? There are too many people living in darkness, and when you live in darkness, you don't see everything. I had that experience at Christmas time. We had a little box at Christmas time. It was in the shape of Santa, and my wife put in candy, taped it shut, put the name on the grandchild on it, put it under the tree. The grandchild was going to come a week and a half. Well, I had other grandchildren that were there. They looked around the tree, the presents. You know how kids do? We organize the presents, look at them, shake them a little bit. One of them got to this box and said, oh, there's a tape on there. Off comes the tape. Oh, candy in there. Well, I'm going to eat some candy. Grandpa said, no, you can't do that. It's for somebody else. Grandpa tapes it shut. Grandpa decides I can't leave it under the tree, and I heard from somebody else with great authority, a good place to hide it is in your sock box or drawer. So I did. Put it in my sock drawer. Forgot about it. Christmas time comes. A week and a half later, little ones come. Open up their presents. My wife says, didn't you get candy? No, I didn't get candy. Where's that Santa Claus box? I don't know where it is. Jim, where's it? I don't know. Did you kids eat it? No. Did you hide it? No. I have been going to I want you to know I change socks often, but I've been going to my sock drawer every day, but in the dark, because I didn't want to wake up people, so I went in there, feel myself. Oh, there's a sock pull. So socks, I got them together, pulled them up, put them on. The other day, after Christmas, everybody's gone. Just a couple of days ago, I went to my sock drawer in the light. And in the light, what did I see? I saw the box of candy. In the light, you see so much more. In the light, you see your sinfulness. In the light, you see your salvation. In the light of Jesus Christ, you see how he's leading you and guiding you all of the time. Oh, the light is so wonderful. Follow the light. They arrived at Bethlehem and they worshiped Christ. Now look, I'm just going to change. I'm on page 3 of a 6-page sermon, but I'm not going to go much further. I'm going to stop pretty soon. God led them to Bethlehem. And then God spoke to them and said, go another way home. All the time, they are in communication with God. All the time, God is leading them and guiding them. That's the way it is with you and I. As we continue to grow, one of the things about growing means that we're growing in our faith, growing in our love, growing in our serving, growing in our reaching out. But it means that every day we have to be led and guided by God. Joseph and Mary were in Nazareth. They went to Bethlehem. They thought maybe they were going to stay there for a while. They had a house. That's where the wise men came. But they didn't stay there. God says, now I got to move you to Egypt. See, God keeps moving us and thinking about us and moving us spiritually as well as physically. There is a God. I'm going to close with this. There are so many people today in our world that say there is not a God, but there is a God, and we believe in God. One professor came to his class and said, have any of you seen God? Have any of you seen God? No. Have any of you touched God? No. Therefore, God does not exist. The student got up and said, have any of you seen the professor's brain? No. Have any of you touched the professor's brain? No. Therefore, the professor's brain doesn't exist. I don't know if you want to use that sometime or not because you want to be kind to your teachers and professors and so forth, but think in terms of how you're going to react to people who say there's no God. Because there is. We believe it. And we're following him.